Now we're back with our next speaker. This is speaker number 4 for the day. And our speaker is Mr. Thushera Kawdawatta, who is Chief Executive Officer at Axiata Digital Labs. He is a technology leader with 25 plus years of experience in software product development and consulting for world-class global enterprises. He has been a trailblazer in many IT initiatives at global industry level on software reuse, engineering productivity and software sizing, and architecture governance and best practices. He has extensive experience in architecting 100+ software projects across the globe, including for Fortune 500 enterprises. Prior to Axiata Digital Labs, in his 19+ years of experience at Virtusa Corporation, he played the role of Chief Software Architect, who is responsible for software architecture standards, governance, capability development, and R&D, along with having the responsibility of building a scalable organization. Adding to that, Mr. Thushera has also served in key technical leadership roles for 2 startup companies. He's here today to speak to us about blurring boundaries in software quality. And with that, Mr. Thushera, it's over to you.
Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. I hope I'm audible. Let me share my screen. Okay. Just to check, since we are on virtual platform, I hope everyone can see my screen. Yeah. The topic I'm going to talk about here is some time back is not a pleasant topic, and always we had some disagreement, arguments, alignment, as well as again finally the partnering, which it's not really ended up in the right place. So with that lot of experience, I thought one of the topics that we should talk about is what are these boundaries in software quality when you're talking about quality, and then is there an opportunity that we can blur those boundaries and then reaching to a boundaryless quality assurance. So let's talk about some of the things that you have been taught. And as software professionals, when you come to your industry or maybe your profession, you have been taught many the theories, right? Some of these are like the process, the plans, methodologies, approaches, tools, and all such that. And then the execution models, as in V models that you're all aware, and then which I'm not going to talk about today, right? Because I'm assuming you are an expert in this particular field and you know what that is, right? Yeah, when it's come to that noble QA professional starts with the commitment, right? So it starts with, okay, I shall make my, I'll make sure that my team develops the right product, right? Yeah, so that's first thing. And then I shall always think from the end user perspective. Yeah, so typically that starts with, I'm looking at my software is being used by end user, so I'll look at that perspective. I'll get involved with all the phases of SDLC to validate the quality. So from requirements to deployment, so I'm getting involved. I will never let the defect sneak into the production. That's one of the commitment typically QA professional plays. And then it says, I will never give up any, give feedback as early as possible, because so then you know that, so it is sometimes this expectation can be a mismatch. And I shall always automate as much as possible to increase efficiency and coverage. So you start with that, okay, I know that I had to do a lot of testing. I need to have the efficiency on that. I'll automate all the possible test cases. And say, yes, I'm the sole owner of my team's quality. Regardless of what that is, I'll make sure the product is getting out with the highest quality possible. And then, yes, it's initiated with the very best intention. I have been in this seat, and then I know what that is. Yes, it actually starts with that, yes, let's make that dev team is the best friend. And so developer says, I'll I'll make the product, I'll develop the product according to the requirements, and then QA will say, I can break into the system and I can find as much as possible for you to make sure that the product is super solid, right? And then actually, so develop and test is do not act as enemies, but remain as a partner. That's typically how we start. Then after a while, the bitter reality kicks in. What will happen? So after putting all of this commitment and effort and applying the methodologies, best practices, standards, the process, the way of testing, so 34% of the global IT projects have either been delivered over budget or later than agreed timelines, or 30% of the projects were abandoned due to lack of researchability and quality issues. And mind you, is 31%, right? One third of the software. And then again, so then think about the standard time allocated for software testing is less than 30% of total development effort. That's based on the Capper-Jones analysis. But at least you spend about 30%. And the best thing is actually the IT industry spend about 312 billion in fixing software defects, which is half of the average total IT budgets in software, right? And all of these things, yes, as we have been spending money, we have put the right strategy in place, we have the right intention, we have the right commitment, and then we come to this stage. This is where we are today. So why does this concept of QA does not live up to the expectation? People will ask that question, right? So I mean, 30% of the software is failure, and we are spending more like half of the budget on testing. But still, actually, we won't get to the right levels. And at the end, so look at our industry demands highly from our QA professionals, and way more than what you think, right? So you are expected to do all the testing, the types of testing, right? And then the way of testing, right? And then on top of that, you are demanded the particular methodologies. Could be agile, Kanban, Scrum. All of this is also actually you have to be part of it. And then you was tested of technology. Now you have to test the bots, to clouds, to the analytics, to big data, machine learning, and all of these things. You have to be on top of your the radar. And then that's just demanding the time. So there's a limited time that you can work on all of these things, right? And so finally, what you report is you report the test coverage and the pass rate, right? So this is what typically what you do. Yeah, it's a nightmare for a QA professional, honestly. I mean, I have been in that, and I know what the typical QA testing cycle and what the QA professional goes through, right? And believe me, and if you know a type of testing, at least there are about 100 types, 100 plus types. At least I have come across about 43, 45 types of testing. And just go through this. I'm not going to talk about a lot on this, right? And all of these testing you typically carry out in your project, right? And none of these things are saying, okay, it's not required. I mean, if you look at any of these tech, could be a monkey test, to mutation test, to say a stress testing, to vulnerability testing, happy path testing, gorilla testing, the branch testing. I'm just picking up in random, right? I mean, because just to make sure that all of these are very valid, right? And all the QA professionals execute these type of tests. And believe me, I know, so if there are any developers or engineers, they raise eyebrow that yes, QA professional execute these type of tests, right? That's a lot of work. And that requires a lot of commitment, a lot of passions, a lot of knowledge, a lot of skills, right? And after all, we come to this stage after executing and putting a lot of effort. Now we start with that great partnership of, yes, I can be a best partner. I'll try to find the best, all the possible defects, and you do the development. Let's get the best product out. And then comes to a firefighting, right? And then Yes, so then the developer becomes an enemy, and tester becomes enemy of a software developer, right? And yes, it's famous that yes, it works on my machine kicks in also sometimes and most of the time, right? What will happen? So value of a QA is always under scrutiny, right? So actually developer says, yes, I have used I follow the process according to the requirements. I use the right technology. It's working, and this is your system issue, right? And again, testers says, now this is what my boundary and this is I have done, right? This is I know this is not very new or maybe news to you. The final reality, honestly, I mean, after doing, as I told you right now, maybe 50 odd types of testing, lot of commitment, lot of partnership, lot of collaboration, you can't fall lower than this, right? Because all are blaming now on the software quality, right? So what you report is, I have executed all the tests we have, and my pass rate is 100%. And I potentially have covered my old test case coverage is about 100%. And then the Pinocchio syndrome comes in, right? So it's actually Pinocchio doesn't know why his nose grew, right? So, so this is where the sad part is. Actually, then what could have been done to achieve the optimum efficiency QA beyond our boundary? Let's start with changing our way of, I mean, we should start thinking differently, right? And so mindset of a tester, not a QA professional. So I think let's shift. I mean, I know this is actually is being a big topic and we have been talking a lot, but I think first step is to make sure that we start that mindset of I'm a QA professional, right? And then mission is, it's very important, mission is not to do that testing or actually the coverage and reporting, rather what is the ultimate client's expectation. So that's where the problem starts, right? So typically engineer develops QA tests, go to the client or the user starts complaining that this is not that is not that, and then they're getting into a discussions of the change requests, then coming to a discussion of BA hasn't captured all the requirements, right? All of these problems comes in. But if you start actually the QA professionals start looking at what is the end user expectation or end client expectation, then you start working backwards. And after all, as I told you, there are a lot of work being done behind, right? So what you see is the report coming in from the QA team that all the defect metrics, your DDR to DSI to BRI, and all of these defect metrics, and the pass rate and the coverage, right? And then when you do that, then you can do that. So then there are a few things that we need to do, right? The preparation. Be prepared for a rough ride. The first thing first, what you're going to do, you're trying to find a fault on a developed code, right? So you are going to challenge somebody's ego of that, hey, I developed the software the best possible way, and you're trying to find a defect. First, understand that reality. Right? Get prepared for that rough ride, right? And yes, efficiency is vital, and you will never get to enough time to test, right? And then you need to make sure that what is our approach. So you have to be subtle in our approach. That you can't test every single scenario. That's why I think there are a lot of test strategies how we can get maybe optimal test scenarios, right? And other thing is logical thinking is your best strength. So you guys are one of the best analytics in terms of in software because you think differently than a typical engineer, right? I have come across a lot of QA professionals think logically than just emotionally and functional, very narrow. And then comes actually so the domain expertise. That's a very strong weapon that you have. Let's leverage that because that's where the most of the time it goes wrong because end users are attached to a particular domain, right? It's say ordering a fast food, then he knows what he wants and how he wants really kind of make that order. not the developer thinks that this is how it should be developed, right? So then you should start thinking about the end user perspective. And of course, now in the modern days, QA is not just a button pushers like in 30, 40 years ago. Right now, QA professionals have an opportunity to be one of the top-notch, equivalent technical competent person, right? And then at least in the high level understanding, in the concept level, plus theoretical concepts that what those technology does, can't do, can do, the limitations and everything, right? Then again, let's get yes. I think we talk about get involved in the SDLC cycle from day one, right? And then generate value through innovation. So then you need to think about what are those like innovative approach to kind of increase the coverage, and optimize test design and the planning, right? Approaching focusing on the reporting, because that's where sometimes things go wrong, and the way you report or how you report is sometimes it's being taken or received differently. Yeah. Then predict the defects. So there are enough clues in the domain perspective, plus the technology perspective and the environment perspective. And there has to be some prediction model. Prediction have to come in from the QA professional that, okay, this system, this area, you might hit a performance issue, right? In that case, you can. That's why the strategy, like when you're looking at the test strategy and test approach, then you can use those some instincts and the heuristics that, okay, this is the area that I'm going to have a thorough. That's where maybe your gorilla testing is really important, right? Go pick an area, go hammer thoroughly, right? Yeah, and just not report the status, advise on risk. That's where actually the key strength will come in from the QA, right? Early findings such as they are crucial for optimum delivery. Automation is your best weapon, as I told you. So again, then you can actually optimize your time, and then make sure that you spend time on some of these predictions and some of the innovation that you can spend time on. Yeah. Then yes, how we can get to this pathway to the boundaryless QA, right? So typical questions asked, okay, I spent about $200,000, and this, and then how many hours that we have saved? Answers typically we get is none, because not because of we have not saved. Actually, we don't know how to sometimes quantify that, right? And then again, how many defects that we have found new? Sometimes our answer is none, because this when you are actually coming to a automated test, the manual test has been carried out and that particular area is cleared. Now, when you're executing an automated test, it's actually tested multiple times before. Now we are again coming back to the same thing, unless the system got changed or anything, and then we found abnormal area and abnormalities. Then okay, then what are we doing is actually leveling the risks, right? Then okay, fine, if you are leveling the risk, right, then we need to find another job, or maybe we need to find more defects, right? Yes, let's start with that. Automate as much as possible, right? Then actually, when you're looking at test automation, it's very important that what we pick is what are the test cases we pick to automate, right? If there's no ROI, don't even touch, don't automate, right? Sometimes we kind of hung up on the frameworks. Frameworks are not a must. So don't complicate things. Simpler the better. I mean, if you can write a simple script, if you can automate that, go for it, right? And sometimes, yeah, we have seen that, yes, we are waiting for the right testing framework to come in to do all the automation, whereas you can do even very simple scripts. Could be a batch, maybe simple batch script, or maybe a Python script or whatever. It is very simple that you can automate some of this monotonous repetitive stuff, right? And second, again, they're very important that the expanding the breadth, right? So it's not just one channel that you're trying to test. try maybe expanding that boundary, or maybe like multiple channels, possible multiple channels that you can think of, even though the final product may be used on one single channels. Sometimes this boundary, like this boundary value analysis, so then sometimes those boundary value comes from the different kind of environment or systems. And ultimate ROI would be you define or design your system to embrace change. And first of all, we need to understand the systems are built to change, and the system that you're building today is going to change in at least few weeks or few months, right? And if your system and if our systems and our test cases are not designed for it, obviously you're asking for a failure. So after a while, then again, you have to spend again a lot more time redefining your test cases and rebuild your automation suite and everything, right? So simple premise is, yes, your systems keep changing and will change. That won't change, right? So let's look at that. And so this is where actually how you should move, how we'll move into that boundaryless or the automation or boundaryless QA. And it's a pathway. It's not the approach or methodology, right? And in summary, what I talk about here is not just a methodology or maybe like anything that we need to do as a QA profession, how to do. And we discuss a pathway to understand the boundaries in reality and typically why they formed. And that what are those boundaries, right? What traits we need to develop in terms of getting to that boundaryless QA. And then again, successfully attempt to blur those boundaries in software quality, and then making sure that the walls, that the passing of the balls is not there, and making sure your system is you are not designed for rigidity but kind of designed for agility, and those things have to be in mind, right? With that, not to take a lot of time, and making sure that you got the sense of what I am talking about. Yep,
Right. Thank you, Mr. Thushera. We do have a question that has come in. Perhaps you can take a few minutes to answer this one. This is by Kumara, who writes in, to avoid dilemma of exhausted number of tests, how do you advise QA teams to collaborate with product owners to choose the right approach to focus on vital few tests for specific type of projects or scenarios to deliver best outcomes to satisfy customers?
My goodness, that's a
mouthful.
Fantastic question. As I told you, I know that yes, hundreds of test types, and then at least you know that we have to execute about 40 odd test types. Of course, yes, the first question is, do I have to execute all types of these tests, right? And what value if I get? For example, if I'm doing monkey test, I think monkey test is a must, right? It's like monkey test is assuming the user doesn't know anything about this system, and he can go and click here, click there, type anything, put everything, and then try to hack the system. That's a monkey test. And then the gorilla test is it's actually, so you pick as I told you, right? Maybe that the heuristics and understanding the potential areas that can go wrong. That's why your analytical mind, logical thinking have to come in. You know that this particular piece, maybe say ordering.
It's 6 o'clock.
Process is the complicated one and very cumbersome. Then you pick a gorilla test, go and hammer that module with all the boundary conditions and all the ways, the types of methodologies of testing applicable for that. And then even you can think about, now then think about the load test or a stress test or maybe endurance test. There are multiple different types of tests. Then pick that module, do the gorilla test on that, right? And again, so there are other types I talk about, and then based on those heuristics, that's why it's very vital that you blur those boundaries. And when you blur those boundaries, you can pick and choose. Okay, I want to execute this particular test on this particular scenario, right? And then only you can really come to that. Not now you're not just reporting defects or maybe reporting my completion of tests, but rather reporting what exactly end user and end system is going to look like. But it's a tough question to answer, honestly, right? I'm maybe not the best person to answer that also, because the QA person should be able to think, when you list down all these types of tests, okay, I'm going to use this particular test for this scenario, and this particular test for this module, this particular test for this use story or use case. I mean, it's maybe it's very logical thinking what type of test is applicable there.
We do have time for just one more question, and this one comes in from Nuwan, who asks, what are the actions we can take to mitigate failing automation test scripts in production environment or pre-live environment while running sanity testing?
Okay, now this is, I hope Nuwan must be an expert in this area. That's why he's asking these questions. You always know that, yes, you automate the test suite, and in production, yes, you run a test sanity test, right? And then I need to execute a test case, and the automated test suite can get sometimes obsolete, and that's where actually uh, what's that mutation test comes in. So I hope mutation test you guys are executing. That is, mutation test is you go and touch a code somewhere, you change the code, not a drastic change, and see how is the system's going to behave, right? Maybe it could be a syntax error, could be a logical error that you're introducing into the code that trying to realize how the system is going to behave. But in this particular case, it's I mean, this question is you can't answer generically because it's systems to system, type of systems to development environment to what the users are going to use is different. Another thing is when you're automating, I hope you're not automating based on the web crawlers, right? And it's have to be based on very logical points, right? It could be the particular web service or maybe a particular logical point that you're automating. But if you start automating based on maybe web crawlers or maybe screen scraping, definitely things will go wrong. Yeah. But again, the sanity test, that's again applies the what's that you call impact analysis. You need to know that, okay, what areas it has been changed in my code or function, and what are the impacted areas in your code that potentially can impact my type of test cases, and then you execute those test cases, right? So there are, I mean, again, so when you look at the QA professionals, they exactly know what those impact boundaries, impact analysis, and then areas that you need to focus on when it comes to the automation. I'm not too sure I have answered that question because it's a very, very diverse question and loaded question also.
Yes. All right, that's all we have time for though right now. So we'd like to thank you very much, Mr. Thushera, for joining us at our summit and also for sharing with all of us how to blur the boundaries in software quality. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much.